writhe. You have to roll. Still working on my rolling of my R's, but it's like writhe, and like the last part's like a TH almost.
Okay.
Some people pronounce it as wreathe, but I generally see that the EI is like a or I. That's how they pronounce it. But so the primary meaning of writhe remained as riding, coming from the Elder Futhark. So it's still held on to that meaning of riding.
Hmm.
And this rune is very unique out of all of the other runes for being named for an action, for like some form of an action. Um, a lot of the other runes are like energetic or speak to more of the subtle body energies and stuff like that. And this is more of an action. Now there's two different so Writhe is the Old Norse pronunciation of it, and Rad is the Old English pronunciation of it. But both carry the meaning to ride,
Hmm.
and they though they took on secondary meanings for each one. So um when we look at the go into the etymology and the meaning behind the word, writhe carries the meaning to raid or a mounted company, meaning like an infantry of some sort, or it could even be used as like a carriage or a wagon in which people were carried in or rode on. In Old Norse, we'll find that many of the words will have multiple meanings to them depending on how they're used within a sentence. So it really depended on that. So if we brought that into our knowledge or the energetics of Rai, they could bring in this idea of a journey or movement of action or even a group movement. So it's like the energy of that would occur when a whole tribe decides they need to leave and move to a different location or a migration type of feeling to it. The rad in the Old English part, it carries the meaning of a mounted expedition. So again, we're getting that feeling of some form of a group moving, and it's also connected to a meaning of a place where riding took place. So it could be the road or a path. So it was commonly referred to riding horseback and or the use of a ship or a wagon. And back in Viking times, horses and ships were seen on the same level because they were the quickest way to travel. And both were used to carry men on military campaigns, and also both were used to move families, tribes, and everything from location to location if they needed to get out quickly, or maybe the land just wasn't producing anymore and they all needed to move on.
Hmm.
So it's really connected to like all forms of journey. You can connect it to like our life and death journeys, or perhaps if we go into like our spiritual, energetic type journeys, it could be this rune would be a very good rune to work with if we're going on, um, let's see, journeying between the realms,
Hmm.
or to use for healing as well. Specifically for I would say that it would be really good for healing like our legs and our hips and stuff like that, because that's what moves us forward. That's what propels us forward, and so on. And the shape of Rise also, like it's kind of like a person stepping forward, right? Moving
Hmm.
on its path. So it can be a meaning of to do something or to move, to take action of some sort. It's an energy of always propelling forward, always moving forward, doing something more, or perhaps needing to do something more. So if we see it in a reading in context to what's around it, it could have those meanings to it. And the riding thunder. So Rise has, when we get into the Viking Age, this rune really took on a connection to Thor in the aspect of like his chariot hurtling across the sky. So when we hear the thunder, they thought that it was Thor's chariot moving across the sky on his way to fight the giants and to protect Midgard. And they would call it riding thunder. And a lot of times they would refer this rune to that type of warning or energy, warning energy maybe. So it's like it can be a very strong rune, but at the same time, I feel like it is connected to more of a flowy type with the journey and stuff like that. It's got a lot of movement to it. Definitely. You have any questions?
Could be just my mind. But as far as just discerning, like as you were talking, which it is it more how you ask the question? Like if I need to, if I'm thinking about traveling and I need to know, is it now? Like a physical journey? Like, do I go now? Do I go today and I get this? Is it how you ask the question as opposed to it's time to go inward, like in a journey kind of, or a spiritual, like is that like just when if you pulled it out in a reading, would it be dependent on your question whether it's a physical or a spiritual action?
Yeah, I would think it would depend on what your intention is within it. So if you're it's a kind of a tricky one because sometimes we ask the question, am I ready to go on a journey? And if we got this, I mean, it could mean physical or it could mean so maybe if we did receive this to get a little bit more specific with it, you could pull some more runes. Or if you're doing like a full-on reading, then it would be in context with what's around it.
The crow is very loud right now. I don't know whether you could hear it. It is like yelling at me. It's literally because we feed them, so they're like they get very loud. I'm trying to teach it to whisper.
Okay.
Say whisper core, like
yeah. Just lightly.
But it was definitely punctuating what you're saying. Because that to me is that discernment around respecting how you ask the question, how clear you are. Because if you've just picked it out and then you have to try and ask it, it's like it's already told you an action to do. Like, I don't know.
Yeah, the specificity, like trying to be as specific as we can when we're asking the questions, because it's, I mean, it's not, all the runes may appear as not clear to us, but they are very, very clear, very straightforward, and sometimes very blunt in their answers. And so it's really important for us to be able to understand is, really ask clear cut questions in regards to it. There are times like, because I pull runes without asking a question in the morning just to see what comes in, as kind of like it gives me an idea of the energy of the day, of what's maybe coming forward. And so if I were to receive this in the morning, then I would be like, okay, today is going to be a day of movement and getting things done. And, it could get bumpy on the way, or it could go smooth. We'll see what happens, but I never like, I allow it to have like a broader meaning with me if I'm just pulling it that way, because we don't know. I didn't ask a specific question. I'm not asking like, am I going to have a really good movement today, or that sort of. So
Yeah.
if you're just pulling it, then you kind of have to allow it to be more broader of what it could be trying to say. So we'll move to the rune poem here. So we have riding is joy of the rider, and a speedy journey, and the labor of the horse. Now I see, and this is the Icelandic rune poem, and I feel like when I read this, it feels like it's like I get this feeling of like progress and like the forward motion in one's life, and how it can be very uplifting, and just the act of like taking a step, or that first step forward, can completely change someone's outlook in life. And sometimes that's what's needed, is to just take a step and just begin, even if we don't know where we're going or what we're doing or what the outcome's going to be, but just to take the step. So I feel like that maybe the energy of this could be that, where we're just allowing the movement and the motion to just get going. Also like a speedy journey. So if we think of life as our journey, for an example, using life as the journey, like it goes by very, very quickly, right? Yet we're filled with challenges and difficulties along the way, stuff that we got to deal with, move through, all of that stuff that we're required to push through and to just keep moving forward. And sometimes it can get very hard to navigate, but I guess it's in those moments that we learn the most, right? We just keep going, keep moving forward. Yeah. What do you feel? What are you feeling with this one?
Well, it's kind of like it's joy for the rider, but it's work for the horse. Like, so it's kind of like just being aware of both. So what is good for one aspect of life can be hard work if you're the horse. And I often get that with the horse and rider analogy, to make sure it's balanced, make sure there's joy. Don't overwork the horse just for pleasure. Like, use it respectfully, because I would see, like you said, with the horse and the ship having similar meaning. It's the vehicle that's going to get you there, but just remember it's hard work. Both, you'd have to look after the ship too as well, but look after your horses, because you might go, oh, that was a good ride, and the horse is like exhausted.
Exactly, yeah. And
That's
can't
kind of
go
what
further.
Just be aware that, and I think we often get like that if we're in a good space and someone else is not. That's what I often feel like. Just be sensitive to someone else is going to have a different experience. Anyway, I don't know whether that's gone off on a tangent, but that's kind of what I was getting, the two bits to it, being aware of joy and hard work, because labor to me is like hard work.
And as you were speaking, I was thinking of like, if thinking of the horse as in ourselves. Like we are the vehicle and we can get there, but we need rest and we need to take care of ourselves also. So yeah. So we'll move on to Con. And it can also be pronounced as Kaun.
Noun.
Kaun or Con.
I have to write that. Con or can? Is that what you said?
Con or Kaun, like
Oh,
owl.
yeah.
Yeah. So this one will kind of go through the first three are like meanings that they've brought through the kennings of the rune poems. And so it could mean an actual death, or it could mean the death of something, whether energetically, spiritually, or emotionally. And it's not necessarily a bad thing. Like there could be, sometimes a death of something is needed in order for us to release, let go, and move forward. So it's kind of it's interesting how the runes kind of go in pairs here. So we got Writhe and Con, and how they, if there's a death of something, then there's room and growth to be able to move forward, right? And that's that energy of the Writhe. When we read the rune poem, they talk about illness in regards to children and stuff, and we'll go into that a little bit when we go into the rune poem. But so this rune could mean that there's an illness of some sort within yourself or with someone else or something around you, and or it could mean that like illness in the way of something's not right or something's off, right? Because it's like when we're sick, we have like an off feeling. We're just, something doesn't feel right in the body, especially in that beginning stages, right? We start to notice that something's not in balance.
Yeah.
So it could just have the meaning of like there's just something off in a situation. Now there's soar and torch. So this is interesting because Old Norse meaning of this rune is soar or ulcer, and the Old High German meaning is torch. And the Old English rune poem uses torch instead of soar when it talks about this rune. And which name better reflects the earliest meaning of the rune is quite unknown. They don't really know, but it's just been written down in the rune poems. They interchange soar and torch for this rune. And if we look at the root meaning of soar, it actually means heat, and which could, can also be connected to the torch.
Yeah.
So we have kind of a link there that we can see. So if we look at it as a torch, then we can see that the rune has the power to ignite the fire within, or burn away something or anything that is unneeded or unwanted. And it can be used in healing to create like a sort of fever in the body to burn out any illness. So the fever being that heat that's needed to just expel something. And for illuminate, as a torch, it could be used to light the path, or, illuminate the darkness so that we can see more clearly. And I included boundaries in here because in ancient Viking days, they would use the torch to claim their property. It was a whole ritual that they would ignite a torch and they would walk around the property chanting, singing, or whatever to claim the land, their territory. And sometimes they would even place lit torches at the four corners of the property when they first arrived to show that that's their place now. Mhm.
So if you had an illness, for instance, if this was, could you use count and writhe to kind of move it, burn it fast, like to,
Mm.
does that make
Mm.
sense?
Yeah, I'm seeing what you're saying, like as a using them together, maybe in a binder or whatever to um like move the illness along or
Yeah. Or burn it or
Mhm.
I don't know.
Mhm. Like using count to create the heat needed to burn it away and maybe rise to expel, like move it out of the body.
Mm.
I could see that. It might help speed up the process too,
Yeah.
right? But there's also the, and of course, like you know for sure, like the if we're gonna use it, I had used the example of using con to create, say, a fever within the body to move or to heal something, move something out. Um, in that case, in any case with this rune, to be very specific, because things could get pretty hot
Yeah.
with it. Yeah.
Well, it's interesting. It's a little, it reminds me quite often the medicine with, like it's telling you, so it could be seen as a negative, there's death or illness,
Yeah.
but it's also holding the potential to heal that very thing. So it's kind of like the warning, but the the healing is in the same,
Hmm.
like you want it exposed, you want it illuminated, you want to see,
Hmm.
but at the same time use it then to actually move it through,
Yeah.
burn it away, heat it up, like it's because homeopathy does that, like cures like. So I see the runes kind of going, yeah, we're going to give you a little bit of that sore, that heat,
Hmm.
but it's actually going to also expose this illness or
Yeah.
this whatever needs to go.
Yeah.
Um, and same with death. Like if there's death of something, like there's dead matter in an illness. If there's stuff like even flesh,
Mhm.
you'd want that burnt away.
Yeah.
Like, yeah,
Yeah. How we, like when we're doing circle work, when we're asking like our dead cells to be flushed out, and then and it is kind of like if there's a fire, it burns everything away, but then there's so much new growth that comes,
mm,
right? And so it could be the like the burning away, the dying of what's you know no longer needed in our body.
yeah.
Hmm. Hmm. There
And
was
we
some.
know that with the fires, I know this is going to date the recording because we're going to talk about the fires in Canada, but certain trees here, I don't know about over there, like they actually need the heat to crack open the seeds. So people see everything bad about the fire coming through, and yet it's life. It's like it is essential to burn
Mhm.
all this away so that the heat can kind of bring life back.
Yeah, it's the same here. We have trees like that as well that require the heat to be able to plant a new seedling and grow and.
Yeah.
Mhm. Mhm. Also, I see it as a lot of fireweed grows in areas that have just previously burnt. The whole area will have fields and fields of fireweed, and it's such a good herb for our respiratory system and our kidneys and our liver and all of these things. So it's also, if we look at that as a healing aspect to the land itself too.
Mm. Yeah.
I guess there could be a form of transformation in this rune too, right? If we think of that in the fire aspect, transformation. Go here. So we have the Icelandic rune poem, and it says, "Sore is the bale of children and a scourge in the house of rotten flesh." So it's interesting to think about. So like in the Viking Age, if a child were to get injured or sick, that would be like, it could be detrimental to the child because they haven't yet built up a tolerance or immunity to the pathogens and bacterias and all that stuff. Whereas as adults, if we've made it through our childhood back then we've got a pretty good immunity, right? So if we were to get sick or whatever, we have a higher chance of healing, whereas for children, they would have a lower chance if they got injured or sick. And so most likely, if they did get sick, they would develop a fever, right? Because it is the body's natural mechanism to develop a fever to heal, but sometimes a fever can kill, right? So because it's the whole process of a fever is to burn out whatever sickness it is, and sometimes it could be too much for a child. So the literal part of this rune poem is just talking about how that type of a heat, that strong burning, could be like very, very bad for young children. And I would almost feel like they should include the elderly in this too in the Viking Age, because it would be, even though elderly have built up immunity and stuff like that, they were still kind of vulnerable to that sort of sicknesses. And also in some translations, the word bale, so in Old Norse, it's I don't know if I'm pronouncing this right, it's like baigja is the word used for bale, but in some translation it can mean a sudden attack or even a growth sickness. And the scourge part is like, if this were to happen, it could be very devastating, very, very devastating to, because scourge has connotations of devastation, and I feel like that if that happened within a family, it would just be devastating. And the house of rotten flesh. So this is a common kenning, house of rotten flesh, for the burial mounds during the Viking Age. So in the Viking Age, the eminent persons, a really high status persons, were always most often buried. And it wasn't later until like the later Viking Age that they started to do the burning of the funeral pyres. And the burial mound was looked upon as like a house or like a hall of the dead. Like it was a special place for the dead to lay in, and it was often filled with, treasures and sometimes sacrifices, even other humans and animals. Sometimes a whole family would go with their loved one if they died, right? It all depended on their beliefs within their tribe and all of that stuff. And like some would be buried. There's been horses. They found horses in some of the graves, and some of the ones that they believed were vulvas would have her staff and her little medicine bag and everything that she needed to continue her work on the other side. And it was said that above these burial mounds that those with sight, those who could see, would be able to see what they called a hellfire. And it would be just above the flame, or it was like a flame, like a bluish type of flame above the burial mound. And if you were able to see that, that would tell you that that there's a potential that there's a draugr that lives there. And the draugr could be draugr too, if I'm pronouncing it right, is basically the undead. And it's the I don't want to relate it to what we see as zombies right now, these days, because but basically I'm like, that's where they got the zombie idea from, the Norse mythology. But they inhabit these burial.
Hollywood styled it.
Yeah. But they're said to inhabit these burial mounds and guard the treasure within. And sometimes the draugr would leave the mound if they were enticed to come out or disturbed. And there's a lot of sagas that talk about the draugr can be in a bad way. But sometimes they were very protective, especially of their loved ones and such. So there was both sides. I mean, you definitely didn't want to like piss one off by trying to steal the treasure, but it did often happen where people would dig up the burial mound.
Is it like a ghost then, like just someone that hasn't fully left?
Yeah.
Like,
but more but if you read the sagas, they're much more animated. So not so much like a spirit, but like they appear as though they're like a full body, but often rotting because they're dead.
yeah.
So what do you feel when you go through this rune poem?
Yeah, it's a real warning that to get ill as a child is kind of potentially death and devastation. Like it's a real warning to like you were saying, around children being vulnerable to these illnesses and that. And you can imagine that like childhood illnesses, if you get them and you get through it, your immunity is great, but it's also the worst time sometimes.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. I guess that could be part of the devastation too, where of moving through that illness. And if you've made it through, you've built that immunity, but even the time where you're building your body back up would be like your body's devastated from it, right?
Yeah. Which goes back to that dead, like I was saying, the dead flesh, like the rot, like there's a lot of death after sickness that needs to be purged out in a way, even if you're still alive. So
yeah,
like housing that, I think. I can imagine the fear if you're a parent though, to know, like to have this come upon your child, because straight away there's probably a high percentage that didn't make it through. So you're looking at possibly losing your child. The real there would be sense of fear in this, definitely. Especially if the room was sort of drawn and, you know, like you're saying, something's off, you were saying, or there's possible death, and you're not sure who. Like, if I was a parent, I'd be like, I hope it's not one of the children that it's referring to. Like, you'd kind of be because that would be the worst kind of reading, if you like, for it to be one of your kids.
Yes. Yes. Yeah, and if you would be doing like readings like this often for yourself and this came up, it would be, I would definitely take it as warning, definitely. Right.
Mm. What
Mm-hmm.
if a battle was coming and the children got injured in it too? I'd be like, that's when they can get infections and
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And even the simplest scrape, right?
mm,
Like then kids playing around, the simplest cut from a tree or a rock or a fall could even create
become
something.
infected. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess we take it for granted, now what we have available to us compared to then. Like it wouldn't even cross my mind that if like I have a blister on my hand and if it were to pop and got infected, wouldn't even cross my mind that I could get sick from that. Right?
Yeah, we've minimized something and yet could be life-threatening.
Mm-hmm.
It's only a few hundred years ago, really, when you think about mindsets of what sickness meant and what the potential was
Yeah.
to your family or yourself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, not that long ago at all. And if you came from a family or a tribe that believed that you say the the father dies and so then the whole family goes with. So it's like to even consider that, that would be, I would be like, don't you dare get a cut. Don't you dare get hurt type thing, right? Because like it's
Mm,
but I guess it would be a completely different thought back then. It was an honor to go with, right? Because you wouldn't want your loved one to go on their own into the other realms, right? You'd want to be with them. So it's a whole different mindset, completely different mindset than what we have now.
yeah,
Yeah. It's very fascinating.
yeah.
Mhm.